Hello again, Roy.RealEstate with Coldwell Banker Legacy in San Angelo. Today I want to continue talking about the West Texas Weather Modification Program. We'll kind of hit some of the highlights, the budget, and some of the results, and then some of the common misconceptions or questions people have about it. So the first thing is budget. The budget, annual budget right now is $360,000. This is over an area covering over 6 million acres in West Texas, in those counties, Sutton, Crockett, Schlacker, Sterling, Reagan, Glasscock, Erie, and part of Tom Green County. So 6 million acres for $360,000. So that works out to about 6 cents an acre per year. There's about 5 different of the weather modification projects going on in Texas now. So I'm just talking about the West Texas weather mod that affects San Angelo. They estimate the results, and again, this is, they have a full-time meteorologist as part of that $360,000 budget, and a meteorologist is kind of like a fireman. When there's no thunderstorms, and they have a lot of time to do research. So they've compiled this research over probably close to a 10-year period now, and they think that they add about 15% to the rainfall in the area. So that's about 2 inches on an annual basis, average, additional rainfall by virtue of the program. So it's a pretty substantial impact. So you take that 2 inches on 6 million acres and you're producing an additional 1 million acre feet of water every year. So just to put it in perspective, that is about 10 times what Lake Ivy holds. So this program produces every year about 10 times the total amount of water impounded by Lake Ivy. So that's a fairly large number, right? So it sounds great. Now, the problem is that how the water gets used. So as this water falls, the first things they're going to use it is the vegetation growing in that area. And then if there's more than the vegetation can use, and it soaks down and it actually refills, recharges the aquifers, fills up the groundwater system. And then above that, depending on, again, how it rains, quick rains, slow rains, all those kind of things, then it becomes runoff that does help fill our lakes. So it's all those things are being added to. So it affects the farmers and ranchers in that area first, because the rain falls on their land and first comes up as vegetation, but they're also the people paying for it primarily. It affects the groundwater, anyone using groundwater, whether they're using it for irrigation, household use, whatever they're using it for, it affects that, because it's increasing the amount of recharge into the aquifer. And then for the runoff, goes into the lake, starting with Twin Buttes and O.C. Fisher, and working down through the system of lakes that we have that are storage reservoirs for water for the city of San Angelo and surrounding areas. So it's a pretty substantial impact for not a lot of dollars. So it's a pretty cost-effective way to do it. So a couple of the questions people ask is, what about hail? Does this program cause us to have more hail? And the answer is absolutely not. In fact, I mentioned that they use it some of the Dakotas and places like that. And in the Dakotas, they use it as a hail suppression program. That is their purpose. The farmers have gathered together and formed these organizations to do the weather modification to keep hail down. Because we talked about how the thunderstorm process happens and what the cloud seeding does. So what it basically does is it makes it start raining earlier in the life cycle of the thunderstorm. And because it starts making it rain earlier and a little heavy toward the early end, it shortens that life cycle of the thunderstorm, and it keeps it from building to the large scale it needs to build to produce hail. Because hail, you have to get large droplets that has huge amounts of updrafts to be able to carry those hailstones up and go through that repetitive cycle of building. Because each time they build a little bit and get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. So the weather modification actually helps with making less hail fall in the areas downstream of it. So it's a positive from our point of view, because there's very few positives to hail. So it's a positive and far as, because it does effectively work as hail suppression. There's a little bit of difference in the way they do it for hail suppression in the Dakotas as far as what stage of the storm. They do it at a later stage of the storm, and they put a lot more product into the storm. And so the effects are slightly different. But ours, because of the way they're doing it, it tends to take the top 2 two levels, if you that 1 through 10 scale, you're much less likely to get those storms that are in that 9 or 10 type scale. So they tend to peak at 8 instead of peaking at 10, which lowers that. And it also lowers the risk of those very severe storms, that tornadoes and all the other things that could come out of them are actually reduced by using this program. So really it's a win-win-win all the way around. It increases the rainfall, it decreases the chances of the super severe storms. And for flooding and stuff, anytime that there's a flood warning on the storm, when there's a flood warning issued by the National Weather Service, then all the cloud seeding has to stop. So, and even times like now, as very wet as it is now, they're not doing any of this activity, and it does tend to be primarily heavy in the spring and the fall, and then through the summer, the storms, it's hard to get there in time. The life cycle of a storm is a lot less generally in the summertime, so they don't have as much time. The larger storms they can still get to and see some effectiveness. So anyway, a lot of different things going on, and there's people that say, well, maybe it's a bad thing the way you're modifying it. No, and honestly there is. I mean, it's like any other science, it's not fully developed. There are some potential negative side effects that we don't know. But the things we do know is for $360,000 a year, we get an average of about 2 inches more rainfall, and you decrease the chances of having the severe storms that produce hail and the high winds, the tornadoes, all that type of stuff. So it's not perfect, but it does have an effect. The other thing is there's a downstream effect. So if those storms are seeded in the target area, as they drift generally toward the northeast, toward Reynolds County, Concho County, that way, there are probably some long-term effects, some positives that those counties are getting, even though they're not paying for the program. So, there's no perfect system. In a way, there's would be advantages to having it over a larger scale and being able to do it that way, but that's not what it is. Each of these water improvement districts has to vote on it individually and become part of the program individually, and so that's one of the ways that people can affect it. If they think it's a good thing, then you can work to get your water improvement districts to do it. It's a long term, not a short term, even though, again, we're producing 1 million additional acre feet of water a year. It's a long-term deal, because that does not all end up in the reservoir. So it's a long-term, but if you can increase the rainfall by 2 inches a year, or 15%, somewhere in that vicinity, then over the long term, you have a substantial impact. Yes, you get more, that 15% is larger in a wet year than it is in a dry year. And there's storms, times a year, different things that you can't do it. Most of the rain we've had in the last month or two, they haven't been able to work them because of the type of storms they've been. So it's not a complete answer. It's an additional, it's a supplement. It's a long-term, very cost-effective way to supplement the amount of water we have. And again, in West Texas, water is one of our greatest valuable commodities. And so we have to be able to maintain population, we have to be able to have sources of water, and this is a way that can help with that. So you can find a lot of information on their website. It's WTWMA.com, West Texas Weather Modification Association.com. You can Google it out. You can watch when they're actually flying. They have lots of really detailed radar data. You can read some of their past reports of the studies they've done. All that stuff's available if you're interested in it. And I'd love to discuss it anymore. If you want to, give me a call. So Roy.RealEstate, 325-268-0775. Thank you.